On August 23, 2003, 19-year-old Miguel Reyes carried the last of his belongings into room 314 of Hartwell Hall, a weathered brick dormitory on the campus of Preston College in rural Pennsylvania. His mother helped him arrange his textbooks on the narrow wooden shelf. His father tested the ancient radiator that clanked and hissed beneath the window. They took a photograph together, Miguel smiling, standing between his parents, his future stretched out before him like an open road. 48 hours later, Miguel Reyes ceased to exist. No goodbye note, no withdrawn funds from his bank account, no final text message or email. His clothes remained folded in his dresser. His student ID sat on his desk beside an unopened pack of highlighters. The door to room 314 was locked from the outside, and Miguel's key, the only copy issued to him, had vanished along with the young man himself. For 16 years, his disappearance remained an agonizing mystery. Police investigated. Volunteers searched. His family never stopped hoping. And then, in the autumn of 2019, a library assistant at Preston College was processing damaged books for disposal when she opened a water-stained copy of The Collected Works of Edgar Allan Poe. Pressed between pages 247 and 248, right in the middle of The Fall of the House of Usher, was a tarnished brass key attached to a faded orange tag. Room 314, Miguel Reyes. The discovery would reopen a cold case that had haunted a campus for nearly 2 decades, but it would also raise a question far more disturbing than where Miguel had gone. Why would someone hide the key to his room inside a library book? And what did they want to remain locked away? If this story already has you hooked, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You're going to want to see where this investigation leads. Preston College sits in the Allegheny foothills of western Pennsylvania, surrounded by dense woodlands that turn copper and gold each autumn. Founded in 1889 as a small liberal arts institution, it never grew beyond 1,500 students. The campus itself seems frozen in an earlier era. Gothic revival buildings with pointed arches and ivy-covered walls, winding brick pathways beneath ancient oak trees, and a pervading sense of insularity that comes from being 20 miles from the nearest town of any real size. Hartwell Hall, where Miguel Reyes was assigned to live during his freshman year, was the oldest dormitory on campus. Constructed in 1903, it had housed generations of students in its cramped, high-ceilinged rooms. By 2003, the building's age showed in every creaking floorboard, every rattling window frame, every light fixture that flickered when the wind blew hard. The college had considered demolishing it twice, but alumni sentiment and historic preservation guidelines kept the structure standing. Miguel arrived at Preston on a partial academic scholarship, having graduated third in his class from a high school in Allentown, Pennsylvania. His parents, both first-generation immigrants who had built a small restaurant business from nothing, were immensely proud. Miguel planned to study biology with hopes of becoming a physician. His high school teachers remembered him as quiet but determined, the kind of student who stayed late in the library and asked thoughtful questions. His roommate, assigned by the college's housing office, was a lacrosse player named Trevor Ashford from Connecticut. By all accounts, the pairing was awkward from the start. Trevor came from wealth, prep school, family connections, the confidence that accompanies generations of privilege. Miguel was studious, reserved, the first in his family to attend a 4-year college. They coexisted more than connected, occupying the same small space but living in different worlds. The first 2 days passed uneventfully. Miguel attended freshman orientation sessions. He met with his academic advisor. He called his parents on August 24th to tell them he was settling in fine, that his classes started the following Monday, that he missed his mother's cooking but was managing. It was a normal conversation, unremarkable in every way except that it would be the last time they heard their son's voice. On the morning of August 25th, Trevor Ashford left room 314 around 9 o'clock to attend a mandatory team breakfast. Miguel was still in bed, half awake, facing the wall. Trevor assumed he'd see his roommate later that afternoon. He returned to the room around 2 o'clock to find it empty. Miguel's bed was made. something Trevor noted because Miguel had left it unmade the previous morning. The window was closed. The door had been locked, requiring Trevor to use his key to enter. Nothing appeared out of place. Nothing seemed missing. And yet, somehow, Miguel was gone. Trevor Ashford didn't immediately think anything was wrong. College freshmen wander campus, explore the surrounding area, make new friends. He assumed Miguel had gone to the library or the student center. Hours passed. Evening came. The room remained empty. By nightfall, Trevor felt the first whisper of concern. He asked students on their floor if anyone had seen Miguel. No one had. He checked the communal bathroom, the common areas, even walked to the dining hall in case Miguel was eating dinner alone. When midnight approached and his roommate still hadn't returned, Trevor finally reported the situation to their resident advisor, a junior named Sarah Wen. Sarah made some calls, checked with campus security, and was told that unless there was evidence of foul play or clear danger, they couldn't do much before 24 hours had passed. Students were adults, after all. They had freedom of movement. Miguel might have decided to visit a friend from high school, might have needed space, might have any number of innocent reasons for being away overnight. But when August 26th dawned and Miguel still hadn't returned, the situation escalated. Sarah contacted the dean of students. The dean contacted campus police. Campus police contacted the Reyes family. And by that afternoon, Miguel's parents were making the 3-hour drive to Preston College, their hearts already beginning to break. What the investigation would uncover in those first 48 hours was both everything and nothing. Miguel's belongings remained in the room, meticulously organized. His wallet was in his desk drawer, containing his driver's license, student ID, and $37 in cash. His cell phone, a basic flip model, sat charging on his nightstand. His backpack hung on the back of his desk chair, containing the textbooks he'd purchased for classes that would start in 3 days. The only thing missing was Miguel himself, and his room key. Campus police interviewed everyone in Hartwell Hall. No one remembered seeing Miguel leave the building on August 25th. The dorm had no security cameras. It was 2003, and Preston College's budget didn't extend to surveillance systems for academic buildings, let alone student housing. The front door of Hartwell Hall was kept locked, requiring a key card for entry, but students routinely propped it open or let friends in without checking identification. Local police joined the investigation on August 27th. They brought dogs to track Miguel's scent. The trail led from Hartwell Hall across the quad toward the library, then disappeared entirely near the edge of campus where the woods began. Volunteers searched those woods for days, calling Miguel's name, checking ravines and abandoned hunting cabins. They found nothing, no clothing, no signs of struggle, no indication that anyone had been in those forests recently at all. Miguel's parents stayed in a hotel near campus for 2 weeks. Their restaurant back in Allentown temporarily closed, their lives suspended in the terrible space between hope and despair. His mother gave interviews to local news stations, holding up a photograph of her son, begging anyone with information to come forward. His father walked the campus alone at night, as if he might somehow sense where his son had gone. By September, when other students were settling into their routines, Miguel Reyes had become a ghost story. Theories multiplied in the absence of facts. Some students whispered that he'd run away to escape the pressure of being a first-generation college student. Others suggested he'd met with foul play, though there was no evidence of violence. A few claimed the woods around Preston were dangerous, that people had vanished there before, though these stories were more campus legend than documented fact. The investigation continued for months, then years, then gradually faded into the cold case files. Miguel's parents never stopped searching, never stopped hoping, but the world moved on. Room 314 was reassigned. New students came and went, and the mystery of what happened to Miguel Reyes seemed destined to remain forever unsolved. 16 years is a long time, long enough for most people to forget, long enough for a tragedy to become a footnote, a cautionary tale told to new students during orientation, a case file gathering dust in a police department basement. But some people never forget. Diane Mercado had been the head librarian at Preston College's Howard Memorial Library since 1987. She was 63 years old in 2019, approaching retirement, when she assigned her assistant, Kara Thompson, to conduct an inventory of the library's damaged books. The collection had grown unwieldy over the decades, and many volumes had suffered water damage during a pipe burst the previous winter. The task was tedious work, removing books from shelves, checking their condition, deciding which could be repaired and which needed to be discarded. Kara worked methodically, starting with the literature section on the third floor, where the leak had been worst. Row after row of damaged spines, pages warped and stained, the musty smell of water and aging paper. On October 17, 2019, Kara pulled a thick hardcover from the shelf, The Collected Works of Edgar Allan Poe, published in 1952. The book's cover was mottled with water stains, its binding cracked. She opened it carefully, checking the extent of the damage, and something metallic slipped from between the pages and clattered onto the wooden floor. A brass key, tarnished with age, attached to a faded orange tag that read, Hartwell Hall, 314. Kara stared at it for a long moment, not immediately understanding its significance. Preston used electronic keycards now, had for at least a decade. Physical keys hadn't been issued to students since the campus-wide security upgrade in 2007. She almost set it aside as an interesting artifact, a relic from an earlier era, but something made her look more closely at the tag. The number 314 was written in black marker, faded, but legible, and beneath it, in smaller print, a name, M. Reyes. The memory came back slowly. Kara had been a freshman at Preston in 2003, though she'd lived in a different dormitory. She remembered the disappearance, the search parties, the police cars parked outside Hartwell Hall. She remembered Miguel's mother on the news, remembered the way the campus had felt haunted that entire semester. She brought the key to Diane Mercado. Together, they pulled up old news articles online, confirming what Kara had already suspected. This was Miguel Reyes's room key. The key that had vanished along with him. The key that police had searched for but never found. It had been hidden inside a library book for 16 years. Diane called campus security immediately. Security called the Pennsylvania State Police, who still had Miguel's case in their files. By that evening, detectives were back on Preston College's campus, examining the book, photographing the key, asking questions that had no easy answers. Where had this book been for 16 years? Who had hidden the key inside it? And most importantly, what did this discovery mean about what had happened to Miguel Reyes? The investigation that followed the key's discovery was both hopeful and heartbreaking. Miguel's parents, now in their 60s, traveled once again to Preston College. His mother wept when she saw the key, touching it with trembling fingers as if it still carried the warmth of her son's hand. Detectives began by examining the library's circulation records. The collected works of Edgar Allan Poe had been checked out 7 times between 2003 and 2019. The database went back only to 2010, when the library had digitized its catalog, so there was no record of who might have borrowed it during the crucial period right after Miguel's disappearance. Of the 7 recorded borrowers, 5 were deceased or had moved away. One was a professor emeritus who had retired in 2014 and, when contacted, had no memory of the book or any connection to Miguel Reyes. The last borrower was Sarah Wen, the resident advisor who had been the first person Trevor Ashford contacted when Miguel went missing. Sarah, now 35, and working as a guidance counselor in Pittsburgh, was interviewed by detectives in her home. She remembered the book, she admitted. She'd checked it out in 2011 while taking a graduate seminar on American Gothic literature. She'd returned it on time, as far as she recalled. She'd never noticed anything unusual about it. As for Miguel's disappearance, Sarah said it had haunted her for years. She'd blamed herself for not taking Trevor's concerns more seriously that first night. She'd left Preston after graduating, unable to walk past Hartwell Hall without feeling a wave of guilt. She'd never stopped wondering what had happened to the quiet freshman from room 314. Detectives found her credible, her grief genuine, but the fact remained. The book had been in her possession 8 years after Miguel vanished. Had someone hidden the key in those pages before she borrowed it? Or after? The timeline made it impossible to know. Forensic analysis of the key itself yielded little. Any fingerprints had long since degraded. The brass showed typical tarnishing consistent with age. The orange tag's ink had faded, but contained no unusual substances. The key still worked. When tested on the locks in Hartwell Hall, which hadn't been changed since the building's last renovation in 1998, it turned smoothly, opening the door to what was now room 314, though the space had been reconfigured and bore no resemblance to the room Miguel had known. The book itself became an object of intense scrutiny. Why Poe? Why that particular volume? Detectives noted that the key had been hidden between pages 247 and 248, precisely in the middle of The Fall of the House of Usher, Poe's famous tale of a decaying mansion and the mysterious death of a woman who may have been buried alive. Was this meaningful or a coincidence? The question became even more pointed when investigators realized which passage the key had been pressed against. The pages showed slight indentations where the metal had rested for years, creating a faint impression over these lines. There was a long, tumultuous shouting sound like the voice of 1,000 waters, and the deep and dank tarn at my feet closed sullenly and silently over the fragments of the House of Usher. The passage describes the story's climax, the collapse of the mansion and its disappearance into the dark water surrounding it. A house swallowed completely, leaving no trace. The discovery of the key breathed new life into Miguel Reyes's cold case, but it also introduced more questions than answers. If someone had hidden the key intentionally, what message were they trying to send? If it had been hidden accidentally, slipped between pages and forgotten, why had no one found it for 16 years in a book that had been borrowed multiple times? Detectives returned to their original investigation files, reviewing every interview, every piece of evidence, looking for anything they might have missed. They re-interviewed Trevor Ashford, now a financial analyst in New York, married with 2 children. Trevor's story hadn't changed. He'd last seen Miguel that morning, still in bed, and had returned to find the room empty. He'd noticed Miguel's bed was made, which had struck him as unusual. Nothing else. But now, asked to think carefully about that detail, Trevor offered something new. Miguel had been meticulous, yes, but he'd also been nervous those first few days. Trevor remembered him jumping at sudden noises, seeming constantly on edge. At the time, Trevor had assumed it was normal freshman anxiety. Now he wondered if Miguel had been frightened of something specific. Police also revisited the library's role in Miguel's last known movements. The tracking dogs had followed his scent from Hartwell Hall to the library before losing it near the woods. Had Miguel gone to the library that day? The library had no security cameras in 2003, and no one specifically remembered seeing him. But Diane Mercado, the head librarian, offered an interesting observation. The library's 3rd floor, where the Poe collection was shelved, was the quietest area of the building. Students rarely ventured there. Most of the literature section had been moved to the 2nd floor in 2000. The 3rd floor had become a de facto storage area, home to older, less frequently borrowed books. It was isolated, silent, and during August, before the fall semester began, it would have been virtually deserted. If someone wanted privacy, if they wanted to ensure they wouldn't be interrupted, the 3rd floor of the library would have been nearly perfect. A new theory began to take shape. Perhaps Miguel had gone to the library on August 25th, 2003. Perhaps he'd arranged to meet someone there, someone he trusted, or someone he felt compelled to meet. Perhaps whatever happened to him began in that quiet space among the books, and perhaps whoever was responsible had kept Miguel's room key. Unable to discard such concrete evidence, but also unable to keep it in their possession. So they'd hidden it in a book on the 3rd floor, a volume rarely borrowed, a place where it might remain undiscovered indefinitely. But who? And why? One name kept surfacing in the investigation's margins: Dr. Edmund Voss, an English professor who had taught at Preston from 1975 until his death in 2006. Dr. Voss had been known for his obsession with Gothic literature, particularly Edgar Allan Poe. He taught a popular course called American Gothic Hawthorne to Lovecraft every fall semester. His office had been on the 3rd floor of the library until 2004, when faculty offices were relocated to a new academic building. Dr. Voss had been briefly interviewed during the original investigation. He'd seen Miguel in the library on August 23rd, the day of move-in, browsing the new student orientation materials. He'd offered to recommend some books if Miguel was interested in literature. That was the extent of their known interaction. But now, looking closer, investigators found something peculiar. Dr. Voss had checked out the collected works of Edgar Allan Poe on August 26, 2003, the day after Miguel disappeared. He'd returned it 3 weeks later, on September 17th, during the period when campus was filled with police, when search parties combed the woods, when Miguel's parents desperately sought any clue to their son's whereabouts. Dr. Voss had possessed the very book that would eventually yield the hidden key. Edmund Voss could not answer questions. He'd died of a heart attack in his campus apartment in February 2006, 3 years after Miguel vanished. He left behind no family, never married, no children, both parents long deceased. His possessions had been cataloged by the college and mostly donated to charity. His academic papers went to the library's special collections. Detectives obtained permission to examine those papers: boxes of lecture notes, manuscript drafts, correspondence with other scholars. And buried in the 3rd box, they found something that made their blood run cold: a journal, handwritten, dated from 2002 to 2005. Most entries were mundane observations about teaching, about literature, about the isolation Dr. Voss felt as he aged. But interspersed were darker passages, reflections on loneliness, on connection, on the desperate human need to be understood. And there, in an entry dated August 27th, 2003, 2 days after Miguel disappeared: "I have done something terrible. Not in the doing. The doing was merely conversation, was merely offering shelter to a boy who seemed so lost, so much like I was at his age. But in the aftermath, in the panic, in the moment when I realized how it would be perceived, that is where the terrible thing lives. I cannot undo it. I can only bury it. Let it become a story, a mystery, something that fades with time. The key rests between pages 247 and 248. The house has fallen. The tarn has closed over it." The journal entry was not a confession to violence. It was something more ambiguous, more haunting. It suggested an encounter, a conversation that had gone wrong somehow, a situation that had spiraled beyond Dr. Voss's control or understanding. Further investigation revealed that Dr. Voss's campus apartment had been in Hartwell Hall. He'd been a resident faculty member there, living on the ground floor. His apartment shared a wall with the building's basement, an old coal storage area that had been sealed off in the 1970s when the building converted to oil heat. In December 2019, with permission from the Reyes family, investigators used ground-penetrating radar to scan beneath Hartwell Hall. They found anomalies in the sealed basement, spaces that shouldn't exist, walls that had been modified. On December 18th, they broke through the concrete seal. They found a small room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, that had been hidden behind a false wall. In that room, they found the remains of Miguel Reyes, identified through dental records. There was no evidence of violence. The medical examiner concluded that he had likely died of dehydration, possibly within days of his disappearance. There was also a note written in Miguel's handwriting found in his pocket. "I came here because I thought I could trust him. He said he understood what it was like to be different, to be scared." Then he locked the door. He said he just wanted to talk, that I reminded him of himself. I don't think he meant for this. I don't think he understood what he was doing. But I can't get out. I've been calling for help, but no one can hear me. If you find this, tell my parents. I love them. Tell them I wasn't running away. I was just trying to find someone who understood. The mystery of Miguel Reyes ended not with dramatic revelation, but with the quiet tragedy of miscommunication, of mental illness unaddressed, of a lonely man who confused connection with possession. Dr. Edmund Voss had likely died, never intending harm, never fully grasping the horror of what he'd done, convincing himself perhaps that Miguel had simply left, that the key hidden in the Poe volume was a memorial to a friendship rather than evidence of an unthinkable crime. Miguel's parents buried their son in January 2020, 21 years after his birth and 17 years after his disappearance. The key, that small brass artifact that had finally unlocked the truth, was placed in his casket, returned to him at last. Hartwell Hall was demolished in the spring of 2021. In its place, Preston College built a memorial garden, and in that garden, there is a stone bench with a plaque that reads, "Sometimes the doors we cannot open lead to the truths we most need to find.